So I thought that my mother would be very happy to bring the flower. So I went back into the kindergarten room. There was no one in the room. You didn't see where you were for a while. Yes, I had a couple of flowers and ran out. When I came home, my mother was waiting in the doorway, and came in with me. Where did you get the flowers? That's nice, she said. But I was speechless. I brought them from kindergarten for you. I was very ashamed yesterday. Yes, I was devastated for a moment and then I said, yes, this flower. Love told me to bring my mother. I don't know where that lie came from. My mother, who was holding flowers and smelling them, was very surprised to hear my words, and then her mother's face was redder than those flowers. I saw her fingers float with them, and she looked around the room, as if she were thinking of something scary. Oh, no, 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 he said, and his voice was very trembling. I did not know that my mother, who likes flowers so much, received these flowers, and was so angry. I thought it was good that I lied to my mother that she had brought the flowers so that you did not bring them. I do not know why my mother is angry, but when I am a castle, it is better for me to pay to my uncle than mine. After a while, she brought me and said, oh, you do not tell me about this story. Tyler gave me. I was born to give it away soon, and I put it on the flower in the bottle without giving it away. Perhaps many nights later, the flower lay there, and at the end it withered the flower again, cut the pizzeria with scissors, and put the flower in the hymn. The night I brought my mother the flowers, I went to love again and sat on your lap looking at the picture book, and suddenly your body was home sucking. And then I listen, and I listen. The sound of the sound of the sound of the sound was definitely coming from the room. My mother is a taboo, I said, and I jumped up and ran inside. I didn't turn on the light in my room. But then the moon was full of lunar calendar, and the moon was bright as daylight, and the silvery white moonlight was filled with half the room. I saw my mother, who was wearing a white smile, sit in front of the gold, and quietly ride the gold. I am only 6 years old now, but today was the first time I saw my mother ride in stock. My mother was better at riding the money than my kindergarten teacher. I went to my mother's side, and there was a little, and she started singing to the tune of the tune, and I did not know that her voice was so beautiful until this time. My mother was so much more beautiful, and singing than my kindergarten teacher, and I stood still and listened to her song. The song was beautiful like a song coming down from that star country with a silver thread. But not long after, the voice began to tremble a little. The sound of a thin trembling song, and the sound of the windmill seemed to be right accordingly. The song gradually thinned and then disappeared in Majima. My mother rose from the air and stroked my head beside her. Then she came out with me, and she was just hugging me, without saying anything. My mother's face, which was full of moonlight, was thought to be very white. I thought she was an angel. I see 2 streams of tears constantly flowing down my mother's white cheeks. Seeing it made me want to cry all of a sudden. Mother, why are you crying? After I asked coolly, too. Aki. My mother didn't say anything for a long time. But a long time later, Aki, I only have one door for you. Mom. My mother didn't answer again. One day, I was playing in my uncle's room at night, and when I stood up to enter the master's room, because I was sleepy, he took the high-grade envelope out of the soul hep, and gave it to me. Aki, I gave this to my mom. It's the price of the moon food. I took the envelope and gave it to my mother. My mother suddenly turned blue when she took the envelope. I thought it was whiter than when I was sitting on the floor the night before. The mother held the envelope and showed signs of nervous. When I said it was the price of a month's meal last month, my mother suddenly surprised me like a person who woke up from sleeping, and my white face turned red again. My mother's shivering fingers, which went into the envelope, dragged out a few pages. My mother sighed with a slight smile on her lips. But for a moment, again, my mother was surprised by what, and at this moment, her face went down again, and her lips trembled. When I looked at my mother's hand, there was a piece of paper folded in square, besides a few pages. My mother seemed to have hesitated for a long time. Then, as if I had made up my mind, I opened the paper and read what was written in it. I had no idea what was written in it. But my mother read it and said that she would wash the cave quickly, and her hand holding the paper was shaking, not shaking, so the paper made a fluttering sound. After a long time, my mother folded the paper into square shapes and put it in a ring bowl, with money in an envelope. Then, like a crazy person, he sits far away and looks at the lamp, and his mother's chest is bulging. I was worried that my mother might have gotten sick, so I went quickly and hugged her in my lap. I said, "Should I sleep, Mom?" She kissed me on the cheek, and my mother's lips were probably so hot, as if a fire-sweeted stone had touched the fire. After a long sleep, I did not wake up, but if I use my side in a dim mind, I touch my mother's soft flesh, and I will fall asleep again. When I found out that my mother was not there, I suddenly became afraid. I ran away and opened my eyes, and looked around my head. The room was light but dimly bright, and the moonlight, full of fields, was to give a faint brightness to the room. I saw that the farm that my father's clothes were put in and sometimes my mother took out, and swept was open, and there was a lot of white clothes on the floor below it. And beside it, half reclining the farmer, my mother, who was only wearing a seat, sat down, raised her head with her right, closed her eyes, and was standing with her lips. Perhaps I was praying, and I thought I got up and crawled. My mother's knees clenched, and crawled. "Mom, what are you doing?" My mother stopped her whispering and opened her eyes, and looked at me for a long time. "Oh, huh?" I went to bed and said, "Mother sleeps with you." My mother took one of her dead father's clothes, and swept it with her palm. I put it in. I sweep it one by one, put it in the wardrobe, closed the wardrobe, filled the iron, and then came back to my seat. "Mother, are we praying and sleeping?" I asked, and she prayed when she put me to bed every night. I don't know what that means, but I keep following my mother and now I am well aware of the Lord's Prayer. But somehow I asked because I remembered that I had just slept and forgotten to pray last night. When I was in the study, I wanted to say, "Do you want to pray?" But my mother was so sad that I fell asleep silently. "Yes, let's pray," my mother said quietly. After Mom prays, I suddenly said because I wanted to hear her praying soft voice. "My Father in heaven." My mother started praying quietly. Just as the will was made in heaven by making the name holy and coming to the country, it takes place on the ground. Let us have food for daily use today and forgive us for our sins and not take us to the test. Just as we have forgiven the little one, don't take the test. I won't take the test. Like this, my mother kept repeating it. It was funny that my mother was blocked after knowing the cycle of prayer, that I am not blocked now. Don't take the test, don't take the test. Because I couldn't stand to keep repeating. "Mom, I will finish it, but save it from evil." Usually, the country, power, and glory are forever with the Father. I finished after. My mother stayed still for a long time, and after a long time, "Amen," and whispered. These days, my mother's work is truly unknown. Sometimes, my mother was happy, too. When you sometimes play music and sometimes sing hymns, I like them so much that I sit next to them and listen. However, sometimes the original ends with a silent cry, and at that time, I also cried accordingly. Then my mother hugged me, and kissed me countless times. My mom only has one gate of Okho. Yes, that's right. He was crying forever and ever while doing. It's like that on a Sunday. It was the next day after the kindergarten vacation. That day, my mother suddenly quit the chapel because she had a headache. In people, my uncle went somewhere, and my uncle went somewhere, and there was a mother and a group of people at home, but my mother, who was lying down sick, suddenly called me. Aki, don't you miss your dad? They ask me that. Yes. We have a dad too. After. I answered by cracking my tongue and acting a little childish. For a long time, my mother didn't say anything and only looked at the ceiling. Aki. Aki's father died even before Aki came out into the world. It's not that he doesn't have a dad. He just passed away early. If he has a new father again, the world will curse. He is not mature yet, so she doesn't know, but the world curses. Then, he is always pointed at, and he even has two poems, but even though he, a nail furniture, studies, and becomes excellent, others swear that she is the daughter of an angry year. Like this, my mother said hotly as if she was talking to herself. And then he was there for a long time. He sings Aki. Again. Aki always never leaves me. Aki always lives with her mother. Even if his mother grows old and becomes a squirt and grandmother, he still lives with her. Even if Aki graduated from kindergarten, graduated from elementary school, graduated from middle school, graduated from university, and Aki became the best person in Joseon, Aki still lives with her mother. Huh? How much does Aki love her mom? This much. And I looked with my arms open apart. Huh? How much? Yes. That much. Aki always loves her mom. And study well and become a great person. I was afraid that my mother would cry again because I saw my mother's voice shaking. Mom. This much. This much. I opened my arms while doing. My mom didn't cry. Yes, Aki's mom has only one Aki. Everything else in the world is useless. Aki, one question is enough. Right, Aki. My mother pulled me and hugged me tightly and kept hugging me until my chest was blocked. After dinner that night, my mother called me to sit down and brushed my hair. Mayaji irons and Mayaji and Jagori pants and skirt. They would have taken out new ones and dressed them all. Mom, where are you going? And then I asked. No. I answer with a smile. Then he lowered the newly drawn hyaen handkerchief next to the pungium and gave it to me in my hand. This handkerchief is that love old man's handkerchief, and I brought this to him. Wow, yes. Don't stay long. He just brought me a handkerchief and said yes. As I went out with a purgan, I thought that there was a piece of paper in the folding. Ma didn't open it and just took it and gave it to the uncle. He was lying at the bar and suddenly got up and received a handkerchief, but for some reason, he didn't smile at me, and his face was very blue. Then he bit his lips and received the towel without saying a word. I felt strange somehow, so I couldn't even go into my uncle's room and sit down, so I just turned around and came back to my master's room. My mother sat in front of the pungium and stayed still on what she thought. I went next to the pungium and sat still next to it. Soon, my mother quietly plays the music. I don't know what song it is, but how can it be a sad and quiet song? My mother played the pungium until late at night, while continuing to sing that sad and quiet song. One afternoon after sleeping for many nights, I went out to the uncle's room after a long time, and he must be busy packing. After I brought my handkerchief to my uncle, I didn't come out very often because he was always looking at me without saying anything, like a sad person or someone who was worried. I was like that, but I was surprised to see him packing like this suddenly. Where are you going? It's like a malu. When? Today. Train rides. The man hung train to you and, when and again, took a pretty doll out of the drawer and gave it to me without answering. Aki, take this. Yes. Aki will forget about the old man who left the furniture, right? I suddenly became sad. So, no, I answered quickly and came inside with a doll in my arms. Mom, look at this. The man gave this to me. I said that you were going far away by train today, but my mother didn't answer. Mom, what's wrong with you? Let's go since it's school vacation. Where are you going? Where are you going to go to the man's house? My mother doesn't answer. I'm bad for you to go. He said, but his mother didn't answer that, and said, Aki, go to the closet, and see how many eggs you have left. I entered the hopping room. There were 6 eggs. 6 eggs, and I shouted, yes, take them all and come out here. My mother boiled all 6 eggs. 6 boiled eggs were wrapped in a handkerchief, and a little salt was wrapped in a ring, and put in a corner. Aki, you're going to give this to an old man, and eat on your way home. After my uncle left that afternoon, I was carrying the doll he gave me in the room and sleeping in a lullaby. My mother came in from the kitchen and said, Aki, shall we go up to get some air in the hill behind us? He's doing. When yes was added, I liked it and attacked it. I told my uncle to look at the house, because he had been there for a while, and my mother came out holding my wrist. Mom, am I going to take the doll that uncle gave me? Then I hugged the doll and grabbed my mother's wrist and went up to the hill in the back. If you go up the hill behind you, you can see the station clearly. Mom, look at that station. There is no train. My mother stands still without saying anything. The wind came and shook the hem of my mother's skirt. Standing still on the mountain like that, my mother looked prettier than ever. A train appeared at the corner of that mountain. Oh, there's a train coming. And I shouted because I liked it. The train stayed at the station for a while and moved with a beep and scream. The train leaves. I clapped my hands while doing it. The mother stood still and looked at it until the train disappeared behind the corner, and all the smoke from the chimney scattered over the sky. As soon as she came down from the hill in the back, her mother entered the room and closed the lid of the pungium, which had always been open until now. Then fill it with iron, and place a ring bowl on it in the previous shape. Then he picked up the hymn next to it and rummaged through it, and picked up the dried flowers from the hook. Okay, throw this out. He gave me the dry flower, which I brought to my mother from kindergarten, and the gate creaked. The egg maker old man who comes every day with small eggs, came in with egg bourbon. We don't buy eggs now, no eggs eaters. Her mother's voice was not even a penny of maps. I was surprised by her words and tried to write a flock, but when I saw her face in the sunset, she did not have the courage. So I put my mouth in the ear of the doll that you gave me, and whispered quietly. My mother is a good goose-rooted woman, and she doesn't have anyone to eat that I like eggs. I'd like to write a few times, but look at her face, and I wonder if she's blue, and where she's hurting. But then I cried, too. Then she took me and kissed me a lot, as I turned to my face.